Good afternoon, everybody. This is a live emergency update as we have a rapidly evolving situation in the western Gulf of Mexico with the formation of Tropical Storm Nicholas. Sorry, just a little bit ago I did about a 30-minute long weather briefing with no audio, so at least I did have some decent practice here getting this thing up and running, but you can see that little convective burst located relatively close to the center of Tropical Storm Nicholas. Minimum pressure down to 1,008 millibars. Maximum sustained winds at about 40 miles an hour. You can definitely see these hot towers starting to evolve here. I still think that Tropical Storm Nicholas is trying to determine where its dominant center is going to be located, and the role of these hot towers definitely crucial. You can see this one unzipping from southeast off to the northwest. This one's located in the northwesterlies there on the western side of that circulation. And the circulation is located on the southern periphery of that convective blob. Overall, this convective blob has warming cloud tops, relatively weaker convective blob as we're leaving the maximum for convection usually happens overnight. You get those big-time convective explosions at night when the temperature difference between the warm ocean surface and aloft is maximized. And so I do expect more organization to happen overnight tonight as we go overnight tonight through tomorrow morning. But look at this HWRF model. Some of these newer models are starting to show a stronger system. I wouldn't even be surprised if this system ends up being a Category 1 hurricane when it comes in. The HWRF has done a pretty good job at predicting the structural evolution of these tropical cyclones last year and through the year this year. And certainly look at move inland there and then die out over eastern Texas. So those big feeder bands just absolutely hammering the Houston area. This is the HWRF, which is the most aggressive model with intensification with Hurricane Nicholas. But right now there are tropical storm warnings in South Texas through Corpus Christi, Brownsville to Corpus, but no hurricane watches just yet. But I still wouldn't be surprised once Air Force reconnaissance aircraft, once they are able to confirm that this system is really starting to organize today, then I wouldn't be surprised if there are hurricane watches right now. But the HWRF does initialize with a deeper system than it is right now. I just was looking at the latest hurricane recon data, and it does look like they're struggling to find a pressure below 1,009 millibars, and this thing was initialized, or at least by 18Z, it was forecasting 1,005 minimum pressure. So it is a little bit too aggressive with the intensification, but still the trend is there with a further east track, less land interaction, more residence time over the very warm Gulf of Mexico waters, and potentially heading up toward Port Lavaca Monday night into Tuesday morning, bringing with it a life-threatening storm surge. Some of the experimental products are suggesting a 2 to 4 foot surge, especially these inlands where you get onshore flow from Brownsville all the way through the Houston Galveston area. The HMON model isn't as aggressive as the HWRF, and I could show you this as well, but it still shows that gradual organization into a legitimate tropical storm. And whether it's a tropical storm or a hurricane doesn't really matter here. There's still likely going to be a life-threatening flooding event that's going to impact somewhere between Brownsville and Houston and potentially the whole entire area. So it does look like the HMON is more accurate with at least with the minimum pressure. Not quite as deep as the HWRF, so a slightly better initialized situation there, better grasp of reality there by the HMON, but it still shows the storm intensifying Monday morning into Monday afternoon just off the southern Texas coastline. And still you get the organization of these big convective bands off on the east side. This system is battling a little bit of southwest and northeast oriented shear, so it is going to have a tendency to focus the convection on the north and the eastern quadrants. And then you get these big convective bands that will likely hammer anywhere just to the east of the center, basically Port Lavaca off to the east. Houston Galveston gets absolutely hammered by this starting Tuesday morning. These big convective bands moving into the Houston Galveston area there, and that's where the flooding event is going to happen. And the GFS model is showing in excess of a foot of rainfall happening over the Houston Galveston area here. And there's a lot of warm water over the western Gulf of Mexico. The yellow there is greater than 30 degrees Celsius. The orange is there, 31, 32 degrees Celsius. So plenty of warm water over the western Gulf of Mexico for this system to thrive. Some of the negative factors are that upper level low over northern Mexico, causing a little bit of southwest and northeast oriented shear. But once a dominant center forms and the system begins to move off to the north, the storm relative wind shear really isn't going to be that substantial, as we do have a south to north movement of this tropical cyclone. Plenty of warm water out there available to this storm. Here are some of the last night's forecast model ensembles. The GEPS showing a little bit further west, but the models have been shifting over to the east, and you can see that the yellows and oranges, the deeper tropical cyclones, are the further east members, forecast members. The further east members there are the stronger of the system, the stronger of the forecast members, because you get a lot more residence time over the open Gulf of Mexico, over the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, than if it were to head further west. The NAM model, though, absorbs it into far northeastern Mexico and basically has more of a nothing burger. Still a lot of rainfall, though, from Brownsville off to the north. Here are the latest GFS model ensembles, and that slight eastward shift seems to be continuing. You still have these GFS model members there that do show a potential Category 1 hurricane off to the west of Houston, but the good news is that at least with this 12Z model solution, you don't have a lot of members directly over the Houston area, but you don't want to get focused on the exact track, because even a track up here to the central coast with that southwest and northeast oriented shear is going to focus big time convection off to its east, big rain bands coming ashore here as well, tornado potential, flash flooding, river flooding, storm surge flooding with that 2 to 4 foot surge. I'm going to be working with Mark during the day today, Mark Simpson, to get the surginators ready to go. We're going to upload that new, the new firmware to the surginator heads, those portions that go below the water, the surginator heads that measure the pressure weight of that water, and then they're able to connect to the stations that fit above the water. I'm probably going to have to fly in, because the Dominator 4 is not going to be fixed until the end of next week. They need to order some parts, and it's just not ready to go. So I want to make sure that I'm looking at the 12Z model runs when I do look at the forecast total QPF. And this is going to be a problem here across Houston, unless there are some dramatic forecast model changes. A tropical storm taking this track. We saw what a tropical storm can do with Tropical Storm Harvey. That made landfall as a Category 4 storm down near Rockport, but then meandered around the Houston area as a tropical storm. I think I'm still alive here. Looks like I just lost OBS. There it is. So I am still live. Looks like I still have audio as well, don't I? Good news. Still got audio. Still dominating. Let's take a look at visible satellite. And I'm really curious as to what the 18Z models are going to show, and if they still show that continued eastern trend of Tropical Storm Nicholas. I do want to show you the recon data as well, and I just showed you that rainfall from the GFS showing double-digit rainfall totals, 1 to 2 feet of water of rainfall possible, Port Lavaca up toward the Houston area. See if we could get an idea of where the center is based on visible satellite. And I am planning on chasing this. Oh yeah, you can see the center in there. Look at that, everybody. Oh yeah, right there. There's our center. And look at that convection trying to propagate, trying to unzip and get closer to that center. If some of this deeper convection can couple on that center, then you'll see more rapid organization. Maybe this convective blob just off to its north could wrap around the western side. You'll see these hot towers come in from the east as well. And if you can get that convection over the center, then it will solidify that as the dominant center. But we can see that on satellite. It looks relatively void of convection right now. Maybe a little convective explosion just on its northern side. Fascinating to watch. Even looks like it has a little bit of an eye feature in there, but no convection wrapping around it. Hurricane Recon is sampling that center. Looks like they have about 1,010 minimum pressure right now, 1,009, and I know the latest earlier estimate was at about 1,008, so it's not showing rapid intensification. And on satellite, it definitely does have that closed circulation, hence why it is a tropical storm. Tropical Storm Nicholas there. I definitely could see that little circulation. That's the center of Tropical Storm Nicholas. Some models are showing this becoming a hurricane, but right now the National Hurricane Center anticipates that it will remain a tropical storm. But you don't want to get too focused on the individual forecast tracks of this, because there is going to be life-threatening conditions, even if it is a tropical storm or a hurricane or even a tropical depression, likely going to have big-time flooding, rainfall, storm surge flooding. You can see a 2 to 4 foot surge expected from Brownsville up through the Houston, Galveston area. That's your peak surge. This is the official Hurricane Center track. Blue is tropical storm warnings, basically from Brownsville, far northeastern Mexico, up through Corpus, and then the yellow are those tropical storm watches that extend through the Houston, Galveston area. But as I mentioned, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see more rapid intensification into a Category 1 hurricane. I know the HWRF shows that. It's a more aggressive model, but it's not necessarily accurate in its model initialization either. So only time will tell. But you can look at certain reasons why it is the most aggressive model in rapidly intensifying this hurricane. And it's because it is initializing a slightly stronger storm than it actually is right now. The HWRF was forecasting the minimum pressure to be about 1,005 millibars right now, but it looks like it's closer to 1,010. But the real issue here is going to be the water, the hydrological disaster across Houston. We're likely not going to see something on the magnitude of a Harvey with 40 to 50 inches of rain, but 1 to 2 feet of rainfall with these convective bands just pounding the Houston, Galveston area. Potentially even supercell storms, potentially tornado threat there. Port Lavaca up toward Houston looks like it'll get the heavier rain, and it's likely going to be hugging the coastline from Corpus down through Brownsville. Several inches of rainfall possible. But if this thing continues to shift off to the east, then we're going to have a slightly stronger tropical cyclone, because it's going to be over the warm waters a lot longer, and that could result in a hurricane potentially. So right now we've got hurricane reconnaissance aircraft is in the storm right now, doing a low-level reconnaissance right now, trying to get a center fix on that, also trying to get that minimum pressure. Looks like it's down to about 1,009 millibars, so it is not showing rapid intensification right now, but it is holding steady. And look at those winds weaken a little bit. Those flight level winds in blue weaken as they're passing very close to that center. Slightly weaker. You're not seeing very much of a rise in the temperature within the center, so there's not a lot of sinking motion, and that's because there's not a lot of convection around the center. But for this thing to organize, all it'll take is for one of those convective blobs to locate over that low-level center. And it looks like we could see it right here as the aircraft is flying, doing low-level reconnaissance, trying to get an idea of where that dominant center is. I think you can see it on visible satellite right now. So what you want to look for is that closed rotation, that cyclonic rotation to pinpoint that center. Kind of like when you're chasing a tornado at night and feeling out the tornado using wind direction. If you have easterlies or northerlies, then you're north of the tornado. When you get westerlies, any westerly component usually means you're behind the tornado. Southerlies, you'll be off on the south side. Similarly, that is used to find the center of the circulation. You can see these westerly winds being measured there. You can see southerly off to the east, and then you can see easterlies to the north of it. So it does look like that low-level center is located right about that area. I'm not sure if that's going to be the dominant center. These hot towers meandering about can sometimes lead to center reformations, and that's going to be crucial as to whether Tropical Storm Nicholas is able to take that further east track. If it does take that further east track, then we're potentially going to be talking about maybe even a hurricane. But we definitely can't see the low-level center on the Radar Omega app here. Beautiful satellite imagery showing that. as well. So I want to show you this 12Z operational GFS one more time for timing purposes. My plan is to try to fly into this area, unless there are some surprises and it looks like it's going to be a weaker system. Maybe it hugs the coastline or even gets absorbed into far northeastern Mexico. If that happens, then of course I wouldn't go after this storm system. But if these model trends continue to hold, I do think that it's going to shift a little bit further east, and that would give it more residence time over the warm Gulf of Mexico. So this is the operational GFS. We'll step forward with time. This is Sunday afternoon. And the GFS doesn't initialize it as an organized of a tropical cyclone as it is right now during midday, but it's still overnight tonight. It really organizes the tropical cyclone well to the southeast of Brownsville. Could be a center reformation off to the east with this convective blob. There is some southwest and northeast oriented deep layer shear, but once this thing does form a dominant low-level center and moves off to the north, then at least the storm relative shear in that sense won't be quite as strong. But this is by late night tonight, early tomorrow morning, just after midnight. You start to get that rain moving onshore here across southeast Texas. Could be some tornadoes and water spouts down there near Brownsville. The NAM model actually absorbs this tropical storm inland there in northeastern Mexico, and a much weaker of a system, but still brings very heavy rain throughout the Texas coastline. This is Monday morning, so tomorrow morning has the center just to the southeast of Brownsville. I'll likely be on the ground at this point, heading toward South Texas or the central Texas coast to wait for Nicholas. Moving off to the north is still going to be intensifying by this time over that very warm water, 30 to 32 degrees Celsius, SSTs out there. And this is going to continue moving off to the north, potentially making landfall near Port Lavaca. Big convective band, likely with tornadoes. Major flash flood potential is going to be offshore at this time, but wherever that band, wherever those feeder bands come ashore, there's likely going to be a 2 to 4 foot storm surge, deadly flash flooding, river flooding as well. And this is one of those tropical cyclones that just meanders inland over the piney woods and dumps all of its rainfall out. And that water has to flow downstream. It flows down to these areas like Port Lavaca, Houston, off to the east as well, Beaumont, even Lake Charles. And this is definitely the flash flood potential is the scary part. The river flooding, the hydrological disaster here could be a big problem. So this is Monday evening, Monday night, late Monday night, after midnight. Potentially a Category 1 hurricane coming in here near Port Lavaca. Right now, though, the National Hurricane Center has it as a tropical storm making landfall. You don't want to get too focused on whether it's a tropical storm or a hurricane, but I do think that there is the potential for hurricane watches to be issued, especially if Hurricane Hunter aircraft can show that this tropical cyclone is intensifying over the southwestern Gulf of Mexico, and we're not seeing that right now. So that is some good news. I'm wondering if the tornado potential could be relatively robust with this system, especially with that upper trough off to the west. Maybe you could get a little bit of an elevated mix layer coming off the Mexican plateau, passing over top those convective bands. On the sounding on the backside of the system, you can see a little bit of that elevated mix layer coming in there, a little bit of dry air in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. That could also prevent intensification into a Category 1 hurricane. Likely this will be just a little bit of a tilted system, pulling in some of that dry air off the Mexican plateau. That's where these EMLs are born often. You can see this little dry layer coming in here. And you can also see the westerly wind shear in the upper troposphere. And that's going to act to push that convection to the eastern and the northern semicircles. But that's also going to push those feeder bands into the Houston area. So double-digit rainfall totals seem likely, 1 to 2 feet of rainfall. This westerly wind shear, while it might prevent a major hurricane from forming, I think it's going to help cause the mega flooding disaster by focusing those rain bands, training over the same areas over Houston. And we saw what a tropical storm can do in Houston with Tropical Storm Harvey there with 40 to 50 inches of rainfall. I don't think that we're going to get that, but 1 to 2 feet of rainfall certainly will cause major problems throughout Houston and to the east of Houston. And this rain band Tuesday night into Wednesday slides off to the east towards southern and central Louisiana, and it's going to bring with it that flash flood threat as well. So let's see between 12Z and 18Z models if that eastern trend continues There you can see some of those tornado soundings evident within this convective shield here, the northeastern quadrant of this tropical cyclone. And we are getting close to the climatological peak of tropical season, and it is lit up like a Christmas tree out there. When you look at the map of the potential disturbances, looking at the 5-day graphic, you've got all different colors. Now, all oranges out there, but there are a couple different waves that came off Africa that we're keeping an eye on as well, especially this tropical wave that hasn't yet come off the coastline of Sahel there of southwestern Africa. But when that moves here off to the west, probably will recurve, but we'll also have to keep an eye on these disturbances further out in the open Atlantic as well. And even off the coastline there of the mid-Atlantic, could get some formation of another tropical cyclone there. But all eyes are going to be on Nicholas here through early next week. Flash flood potential, tornado potential, minimum pressure, 1,008 millibars. Hurricane Hunter aircraft showing it a little bit closer to 1,009. And we've been tracking that low-level center on visible satellite. And at least the center right now, I do expect there to be some center reformations. Maybe the center will have a tendency to try to reform a little bit further east, especially with that convection getting sheared off to the east and the northern semicircles of this tropical cyclone. So a lot to watch here for over the next couple of days. If you definitely heed those mandatory evacuations. If this thing does intensify, then that storm surge is only going to be that much more life-threatening. But again, don't focus too much as to whether it's a tropical storm or a hurricane, because life-threatening conditions are still anticipated. So thank you, everybody, for tuning into my weather report. We did it twice, so I had a little bit of practice to get a little bit more of a smooth delivery. And here is the official National Hurricane Center track. I'm going to leave you with this. Don't be surprised if you do see some hurricane watches or even hurricane warnings to be issued later on. But also, if it is a tropical storm watch or warning, still life-threatening conditions are expected, particularly near Houston. And with that tropical depression meandering over the Texas piney woods, dropping all of its rain, that rain will flow downstream through the rivers and just overwhelm the hydrological cycle there across East Texas, basically Port Lavaca through Houston, Galveston, the Boulevard Peninsula, even out there. Cameron Parish could see some big surge from this event. You can certainly see that cone widen too, suggesting that there could even be a further shift off to the east, which will lead to a stronger tropical cyclone that could come barreling right up Galveston Bay there as well. So still a lot of uncertainty, but the models do seem to be trending stronger and a little bit further east of this tropical cyclone, which is increasing the potential of a Category 1 hurricane impacting the Texas coast tomorrow through Tuesday. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and I'll continue to update you on this rapidly evolving situation in the Western Gulf of Mexico.